the frontline nurses feel like we're still controlling the agendas, controlling the content, controlling how the meetings run, we're not going to get to where we want to be as far as controlling their own nursing practice. And this other quote I mentioned already, but I want to say it again, the shared governance structure offers a decentralized shared decision making in which nurses and managers work in partnership to achieve these goals. So yes, again, just want to highlight that we want there to be increased control over their own practice, but we're all working together to get to the same place. So the role of the nurse manager, I think probably many of you by now have sort of fixed or figured this out as we've gone. Most of you have had practice councils that have been going for a couple of years. But I just want to highlight again, it's our job to be present, but not over-present or under-present. And as I'm saying, think Goldilocks, right? Just the right amount of presence. And that's maybe difficult to figure out. At first, I think it was mentioned by Darcy and some others, you're going to be more involved because a new council is going to need a little bit of guidance. But over time, it's okay to step away a little bit. You don't want to go the opposite track, though, and not show up at any meetings for 12 months, because that's not going to help either. I know a great example of my own council. I was very involved at first, and I found myself, believe it or not, talking at a lot of these meetings and sharing my thoughts about how this is what I think, this is what I think. And it sort of occurred to me after a while that maybe they don't need to hear so many of my thoughts all the time, because they really need to be coming up with their own thoughts. So after 10 months or 12 months of this council meeting, I finally decided I'm not going to come to the next meeting. And at first I was met with a, why not? How come you're not going to be there? And I said, well, I think I just need to take a day off, and it's time. We meet on Friday, so I could get away with that. And they said, you guys are good without me. And when I looked at the minutes of their meeting afterwards, I saw they had probably one of their most effective meetings of all time. So it was good that I wasn't there. Now, I wouldn't want to take, like I said, the opposite track and not go to any meetings from here on out. But I think it's important that we're always aware of how present we are and how active we are, and that we're not overdoing it or underdoing it. And that's a little vague, but I think you kind of have to tease that out amongst your individual units, practice councils, I should say. So yes, it's our job to relinquish control of decision making to the extent that we can, and depending on what we're talking about and what the projects are. We want to support meeting times and allow members to attend. If the times are so odd and if we're not willing to bend schedules and flex a little bit to get people to these meetings, that's not going to be very useful for them. So we want to support the unit practice council rollouts, and this is a little tricky, right? It's not our job to take over and do all marketing and push out all of what they've done, but we have to support it. So we can't, like for instance, on my unit, they're rolling out this sort of HARN report that they can do a change of shift, which some other groups are working on too. So I want to support it. I want to help them. I don't want to take over and sort of act like this is my project or my plan, but I do want to approach people after it's been rolled out and say, how is that going? This is what the council's been working on. What have you noticed? Is it effective or not? Have you given them feedback if it's not working? So I want to show that I'm on board with it. I don't want to act like this is a unit practice council thing and I don't really know what they're doing. I have to show that I'm aware of it, that I'm supporting it, but that I'm not necessarily controlling it, if that makes sense. Provide contact information for organizational resources. So if your group wants to work on a better plan for meal documentation for diabetic patients, I'm going to help them get in touch with Dawn. If they want to work on some staffing issue, I might help them get involved with the staffing office if they've got some questions or concerns or thoughts. And we want the nurse managers to maintain open communication with the UPC advisors. The ultimate plan, as we become right-sized and as our unit practice advisors have fewer councils, our goal is to have hopefully more communication between the advisor and the manager about projects that they're working on, that sort of thing. So the successful nurse manager, again, I borrowed this from that Sin Hall search because I think it speaks well. We trade authoritative decision making in favor of collaboration and facilitation. So we're not, again, running the show, controlling the agenda, making the decisions. We're allowing that to happen around us. We serve the needs of the staff nurse as they assume this decision-making role, because for a lot of them this is new. And I don't know about for your units. I know on my unit, many of the people who participate in my council are my newer grads, my younger folks who aren't yet bogged down by the rest of life or anything else. So they are learning. Again, as I mentioned before, they're learning things that they didn't necessarily learn in nursing school, and we're serving them as they work through all that. So also, we as nurse managers accept and welcome change and demonstrate patience as staff nurses assume a decision-making role, because it can be frustrating as this is going on, and maybe you want it to go in a different direction, but you have to step back a little bit and let them work things out. And as I think Darcy or someone said, it's okay if they make a mistake here and there, as long as it's not something that you yourself feel like is a really awful mistake. So we reflect on the actions and routines to verify that they are in alignment with shared governance. Really, this just means that I'm reflecting on my role, sort of like as I shared a bit ago, as my own council got onto their feet. I looked at how participative I was, and maybe I was a little bit too much, so maybe I need to step back a little bit. And then also that I'm making sure that my unit or my unit practice council isn't completely going off the rails. If they want to try to increase raises for nurses, that's maybe not the best venue. So hopefully I'm going to stop that, and I'm going to encourage them to look for other avenues, or let's look at other projects. And if you really want to do that, then there's other places for that. So this is the exciting part of the presentation. We're going to talk about budgeting. Hopefully everybody knows that you all have 0.1 FTE in your budget for this work at the unit practice council level. And I will show you a picture that will depict this quite easily in just a minute. So your own nurses that are attending your unit practice council should be assigned project time in Kronos to attend unit practice councils. That's the work that you do on your floor. However, we have, as mentioned earlier, all these other beautiful councils that people are participating in. We have now figured out how this can be charged to the clinical education budget, as long as we're not overdoing it. But when your unit practice council chair attends the NPC, if you have members that go to NPDC, or if you have, not members, but staff people that go to the Magnet Steering Committee, those committees are covered by the clinical education budget. So in reference in your packet, there's a little budgeting tool that shows you how to do it. And I will show this page in a minute, actually on the screen. But just before I forget, most fiscal specialists already have this ability to assign hours to the clinical education budget, but not all RN3s do, or managers. So when I was figuring this out on my floor, we just asked Kronos in an email to give permission to 2 of my A&Ms to have access to that budget, and we got it, and that's how easy it was. So they will give your A&Ms or yourself, if you will be doing this, access to that budget, and the next slide will show you a little bit how that works. And as I mentioned down here at the bottom, please encourage people to go to all those meetings if they have any interest at all, because again, it opens up their eyes to a bigger world outside of their own units. So don't let budgeting stand in the way, because there is a separate budget for those people who want to go to those meetings. And to be clear, very clear, the unit practice councils at the bottom, that's covered by your own unit. Hopefully that all makes sense. So you won't be putting this newfound clinical education budget in for those unit practice council work. But for all the others, and there's the time that they should be spending on those meetings, we would be using that budget. And I don't speak Kronos very well, so hopefully those of you, I don't want to read that number to you, but you would be putting in a work rule transfer here. So work rule transfer, this means nothing, right? I mean, your A&Ms know how to do this. If you were an A&M prior, then you probably know how to do this. But you would select that work rule transfer, RN 12400 8030 PRJ, and then in the next slide, and there is a tool here in your packet to refer to, so it'll be hopefully clear. Then you would select the clinical education 318105 budget, and they will buy your hot cups and spoons and forks. Whatever else you need on the unit, 318105 is what you want to put in. I've used it already. So, there you have it. Kathy has a question.
I do, because I was asked, and I just can't quite recall if we got clarity, so if I was asked, probably this relates to that, but for UPC members who are staying over from night shift, there seem to be some definitory differences between what happens if you're staying over for a staff meeting and what happens if you're staying over for a UPC meeting around overtime.
Right.
And did we ever...
Can you repeat the question, because this is really...
In case you didn't hear, Kathy's wondering about those of, like for instance, if you have a UPC member who stays over after 12-hour shift, are they getting double time for that meeting? Are they getting paid overtime for those meetings, depending on how many hours there were? And is that still the case? And I agree with you. I'm told that that's changing or has been changed, but I don't know myself if it has changed.
I have also heard that that is changing.
Yeah.
And I have not seen that written.
Okay, so I think that's just the missing link here for us to follow up on and just
Right.
make sure we're all of a like mind so that we can...
Doesn't the new contract? I think it came out with the new contract.
Yep.
Yeah.
I think you're right.
Straight time. The week referred. We're not paying overtime.
Shouldn't be.
They've been reflected by the employee.
But I think that just hasn't been made clear.
Yeah.
So maybe it's clear on your floor, but it maybe isn't clear everywhere. Yeah. Does that make sense to everybody?
So I don't know what the best, since not everybody who needs to know is probably in the room, just maybe some sort of...
Can Paula put something out once we know for sure so that it's clear to everybody?
Yeah. So at the last NEB, this was brought up,
Yeah.
and I think Darcy indicated that she, and maybe it will be Paula, will kind of make that language in the contract a little bit more succinct and straightforward and share it with all of our nursing leadership.
Yeah, that would be helpful.
It would be, yeah.
Maybe Paula should do
Okay. I'll follow.
And I believe that's all I have. If you have, you can either save your questions either from now or when Tim's going to talk a little bit about the advisor role. Looks like I have a question in the back here.
I assume, so if somebody attends the ambulatory monthly RN forum, that would be treated as same as like a UPC?
Correct. Yeah, because you have a representative on the NPC. I forget her name, but she yes.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah, so she's on the NPC, and then she would use that clinical education budget when she does that. Am I not saying that right? Okay.
That, for ambulatory, the UPC is what she's talking about.
So I was asking actually, I think two different things. One is the ambulatory RN forum, which just started, the monthly ones. Like there's one tomorrow. Yeah, so I would say that was just...
That's not a UPC.
Yeah, that's in clinic budget, right?
Yeah.
And then UPC, sounds like, yes, it's still...
Oh, sorry. So that the question is recorded. So she's asking about they do an ambulatory forum, and is it once a quarter?
No, once a month.
Once a month. I think she's asking if this would be covered by that. And my understanding is that it's not. It's not unit practice council work. It's something different. So that applies mainly to the ambulatory world, that I am not as familiar with. Tim, would you like to talk about the advisor role?
No, I don't have any questions.
Oh, sorry, you got. Oh, sorry, Hazel.
So just to clarify, the CLIN and PRJ work rule only covers NCDC, NPC, and the NCIS, magnet steering.
Yep, all the colorful stuff up here.
So the regular UPC, Unit Practice Council, is covered by the 0.1 FTE.
Correct. Just regular PRJ, project time.
And we'd have to use the work rule and then use the budget by ClinEd.
Correct.
To get them to cover it.
And you'll have to ask Kronos to get access to that budget. And there's, in the packet here, it describes a little bit what we just went over. But email me if you have questions. I did it already. Those hot cups are really awesome.
Why are you taking off your badge?
Because I keep pulling off the wrong thing. Have at it.
I find it hard to believe that you talk too much in UPC meetings. Okay. Hello, everyone. I'm going to talk a little bit about the advisor role, and I didn't say who I am. I'm Tim Meeks. I'm the medical surgical psychiatric clinical nurse specialist, and I'm going to talk to you for about 10-15 minutes about the advisor role. And it's very similar to the manager role, but there are some minor differences. I thought I would first start off by talking about my role as a launch advisor, because I was one of the 3 people who originally started launching all of the UPCs, and I think I launched somewhere between 10 and 12 UPCs. And so I thought I'd talk a little bit about the difference between the launch advisor and then the advisor that is assigned to the UPC, because there are some differences. The launch advisor is exactly what it sounds like. It's the advisor who launches the UPC and gets it going. And almost everybody here has a UPC or is in a UPC. I see a few. Glenn Allen is not in a UPC. Do you want to be in a UPC? You could have a UPC of 1. But anyway, when you launch the UPC, if you'll remember, it's somewhere between, there was one UPC that I launched that only had 2 meetings to launch. They were very high functioning. And then it goes anywhere to like 5 meetings where it can take that long to launch. And basically what you're doing is, first of all, you're talking to the UPC members about control over nursing practice. And I'm bringing that up because I always want to come back to that, because that's really the basis for the UPC, is nurses having control over their own nursing practice. That's the foundation of the UPC, so we should always come back to that. The other thing that we did was, of course, get the charter. Does anybody remember writing the charter? It's super easy, right? No, it's not. Everybody's like, we're going to spend 3 meetings. It's a front and a back of 1 page. 3 meetings doing that. And then it would take them an entire 2-hour meeting to decide how they were going to make decisions. I always got a little chuckle out of that. So they would also decide on how they were going to do membership and leadership. Sometimes it would take a little bit of cajoling to get nurses to step forward into that leadership role, because that was something that was new for our nurses, to really step into that power and to take on that responsibility. But we've had some absolutely amazing leaders. And then really, for the launch advisor, one of the things that I always stressed was that whole first year of the UPC is really about learning to make decisions. It's about allowing a group of nurses to sit around a table and to talk and to make decisions. That's all that it's about in that first year. It's not until they become a little more mature that it gets a little more complex than that. The other thing that was really is time intensive when launching a UPC for the first time is helping them find that first goal. Invariably, the groups always want to cure cancer or create world peace in their first goal. So sometimes it would take a couple of meetings to get them to scale that back. Okay, so you want to cure cancer. How about if you, and then they'll say, well, okay, we can't do that, but we'll make all cancer patients comfortable. Okay, so maybe not all cancer patients, and maybe not all the time, so maybe you start whittling it down until, okay, we're going to make them comfortable during chemo. By the way, that never happened because we don't have an oncology UPC, but that would have been something that could have happened. So from the launch advisor then comes the role of the advisor, who's the steady person that's going to stick with the UPC, hopefully over a long period of time, to help shepherd them through the process of maturing and choosing new goals. There are a lot of similarities with the manager role. You should have in your packet a sheet of paper that has what some of the role definition of the advisor and the manager, and what their tasks are, roles. And they're very, very similar. I would say, though, that the advisor should really work more closely with the UPC than the manager does. Seems a little counterintuitive, but it's all part of that letting go of the need for control. And I think that it helps the manager to do that if they've got a strong advisor that's willing to step in. The other thing that the advisor needs to do is have a lot of patience. It sometimes takes these groups a long time to get off their feet. The advisor helps to acknowledge the council members and the council leaders. And one of the things we do is really try to encourage them to take whatever results they've got on the UPC and to disseminate that information. And that's another way that the UPC members can really get the acknowledgement that they deserve. The advisor should be reviewing the minutes of their UPCs to keep abreast of what's going on and attend meetings as much as is possible or appropriate. And just like the managers, they identify organizational resources and provide that information, organizational information and context for things, so that you don't have UPCs that are either working at cross purposes or are doing the same thing. Sometimes there are work groups that are going on that are trying to accomplish a goal that a UPC may have identified as something that they want to target. So that's one of the things that the advisor can do, as well as is say, you might want to steer clear of that. We've already got a work group that's working on that. The other thing that the advisor does, which is probably one of the more trickier things, is try to help the manager to keep the right managerial boundaries in the UPC. Try to keep them from getting usually over-involved, sometimes under-involved. You also assist the council to brainstorm ideas, because once a goal gets solved, there's always a new goal that's going to be coming up. Help them, develop these realistic goals and help them monitor their progress and always keep them moving towards whatever their goal is. I would say that the primary thing that I try to do as an advisor is I try to role model the behaviors that I want to see in the group. That's especially important during the launch, is you want to role model those things you want to see, and then offer strategies for tasks without actually taking on the task. Again, letting them have control over their own nursing practice. The other thing the advisor does is, from the very beginning, they are coaching the chair on their facilitation skills, helping them develop facilitation skills for the UPC meeting, helping them to remember that, hey, you voted on council norms in the very beginning. Make sure that you're adhering to those. Coaching on decision making and communication, the way that they decided on in their charter, and always offering advice and consultation along the way to both the leadership in the UPC and the membership. I thought, Nate mentioned this, but I thought I would highlight this, that as an advisor, one of the harder things to do is to let your UPC fail. And Nate mentioned this, but it's a really careful balancing act, because I can say that in my own life, in my own personal and professional life, the biggest lessons that I've learned and the most growth that I've had is when I've made mistakes. And so as an advisor and as a manager, you have to be willing to let the UPC make mistakes, as long as it doesn't derail them so much that they get demoralized and don't want to continue. But you want to let them falter a little bit, or I do as an advisor, because that's really where the learning happens, and that is really, really hard to do as a manager and as an advisor. Does that make sense? Yeah. And really the role of the advisor, just like the role of the manager, and Nate touched on this in his presentation, is really going to depend on the maturity of the UPC. The more mature the UPC is, probably the less that they're going to need their advisor, the less they're going to need their manager. So you really have to sort of And as they get more mature, you're able to really promote that peer-to-peer coaching, so that your outgoing chair is coaching your ingoing chair, and helping to develop them as a leader, so that you can sit back and watch the beautiful things happen. So in summary, the advisor's primary role is to focus on the council's progress, to keep them moving forward, to role model and coach along the way, to be gentle and guide them where you think is going to be helpful, and to let them stray occasionally so that they learn some lessons. And that's it. Does anybody have any questions about the advisor role? Any questions about the difference between the advisor and the manager? Nope? All right. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Tim.
You're welcome.